Should a Christian vote Democrat or Republican? So what I want to do in this video is I want to present to you why some Christians may choose to vote Republican as they have their reasons, and why other Christians who love the same Jesus, own the same Bible, attend the exact same church as Republicans may choose to vote Democrat as they have their reasons as well. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna address what I believe are the top 5 main issues that each party stands for, and why many Christians, and notice I said Christians, would vote one way or the other. But don't worry, I'm not gonna leave you hanging, because towards the end of this video, I'm gonna share with you where I personally land and how I plan on voting in the upcoming election, along with some very, very practical tips that I want us all to keep in mind as this election season approaches. But before we get into such a triggering issue for some, I really need to lay down some ground rules and some disclaimers first for a video like this. First and foremost, no political party is perfect. Neither of them reflect a perfect biblical worldview. We need to make that very, very clear, because some people may say, well, if you vote this way, then they're not perfect. And what about this? And what about that? Listen, neither party is perfect. Both parties are flawed. Now, along those same lines, the second disclaimer is that neither person or neither candidate running for president is perfect. And for that reason, I know this is going to make some of you very, very angry, but I am not going to deal with the character of either candidate, although that is a major issue and that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And the reason why is because I personally believe that when you vote, you're not just voting for one person, you're voting for potentially hundreds, maybe even thousands of people to go into office and implement a system of policies that align with your personal worldview, and it extends far beyond just one person. And for that reason, I'm taking the character of both of these candidates out of this conversation for this video. Disclaimer number 3 is I am going to be making some generalizations about each party that may or may not reflect the views of every member or every delegate or every person who says they are a part of this party. And it also may not reflect the views of every single person who votes for this party, but rather the general policies and beliefs that this particular party promotes. Another disclaimer is that I am not going to try to deal with every single political issue, but I will deal with the main ones. And the reason why I say that is because I know that some of you are going to say, well, hey, Brother Allen, how come you did not deal with this issue or that issue? Why didn't you bring this one up? I'm not going to be able to deal with every single issue in this particular video. I just don't have the time. This video is going to be long enough by itself. Another disclaimer that I really think is important is to remind us all that our salvation is not contingent upon who you vote for and how you vote. Should it impact how we vote? Yes. But listen, I've got news for some of you. Jesus Christ died for Democrats. Jesus Christ died for Republicans, and our salvation, thank the Lord, is not tied to the party that we choose to vote for. And for that reason, you will not hear me, or hopefully nobody, in this particular video demonize someone who may choose to vote differently than we do, similar to this pastor right here.
I'm to the place right now, if you vote Democrat, I don't even want you around this church. You can get out. You can get out, you demon. You can get out, you baby butchering election thief. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat in this nation. I don't care how mad that makes you. You get pissed off as you want to. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat in this nation. They are God-denying demons that butcher babies and hate this nation. They hate this nation. Get mad all you want to. I don't care if you stand, I don't care if you throw tomatoes, praise God. I'm about to throw a microphone up in his house. CNN can eat my dirty socks. You cannot be a Democrat and a Christian. You cannot. Somebody say amen. The rest of you, get out.
Now, after seeing that, the final disclaimer that I have for you is, as you are leaving your comments and you are engaging in this video, please make it respectful. If I see any disrespectful comments, I am going to remove them from this particular video as there is no room for that here. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's start with the Democrats. What are some reasons why a Christian may choose to vote Democrat? Well, the first one we'll just start off with is what I'll call social justice issues. So Democrats typically prioritize addressing systemic inequalities in society, maybe focusing on things like racial justice or criminal justice reform, or addressing issues like poverty, gender equality, LGBTQ plus rights, and economic fairness. Democrats typically would advocate for policies that would promote equity. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Things that would protect the marginalized communities and ensure equal access to opportunities and resources for all individuals, regardless of their background. And this is quite obvious that there is scriptural support to support issues of injustice, as well as the importance of caring for the poor. Now, Republicans believe in empowering individuals through personal responsibility and equal opportunities. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But they're all for giving people the tools that you need to succeed on your own rather than relying on government programs. So in other words, a Republican would say, hey, look, we want to make sure that you have what you need so that you can succeed just like others are able to succeed. But we don't believe that the government should get involved and interfere and put money and funding towards making sure that everybody has equal outcomes. So in other words, Republican would say, hey, we believe in equal opportunity, but not equal outcome, which means not every single person that has this opportunity is going to achieve the same outcome. And this is the idea between equity and equality. Equality would mean everybody has the same opportunity. Equity means, hey, let's make sure we give people who need more help or need more assistance the help that they need so that they can possibly succeed in the same way and possibly achieve the same outcome. So to be clear, Republicans would say, hey, let's help those who are disenfranchised by creating more jobs. Let's improve the economy so that way people can work an honest job and not have to depend so much on taking a handout from the government. So they would lobby for less government intervention and less government funding typically. And certainly when it comes to things like LGBTQ plus rights and gender equality, Republicans are typically always going to stand for traditional values. I'll talk about that a little bit later when I get to the Republicans. So to be clear, equality means giving everyone the same resources, equal opportunities. That would typically be the Republican position, or what they say is their position. Equity, however, means giving people what they need to succeed, which could lead to equal outcomes. Let me illustrate it for you this way. Imagine a classroom where every student gets the same textbook, hence equality, but some students struggle and need extra help. So with equity, those students would get the additional resources like tutoring or simpler explanations to ensure that they can succeed just like everyone else and possibly achieve the same outcome. Now, let me go on record and say that to some Democrats, this perspective from the Republican Party can come off as straight up insensitive to those who are less fortunate and essentially send the message, hey, I got mine, I went to school, hey, I got my job, I got my career, I moved up in the world, and so I was able to get mine. I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps, didn't need any help from the government, didn't need to take any handout, and so you need to get your lazy butt up, you need to go to school, you need to apply for a job, and you need to be able to work so that you don't have to depend on the government, so you can have the same outcome and the same success as I did. And my brothers and sisters, like I said, if we present that message, that can oftentimes come off from a Democratic perspective as being very, very rude and insensitive to those who might actually tangibly, realistically need some extra assistance. And the reason why I say that is because not everybody starts on the 50-yard line, right? Let's be honest about it. There are some in this society who are starting on the 50-yard line, and there are some who are not even in the stadium at all. And so, yes, it makes sense in certain times throughout our history to ensure that those who aren't even in the stadium, who aren't even playing the game, can at least have the opportunity to win and succeed when others are already starting on the 50-yard line. So this is something that is very, very important that we should not minimize. Now, the second issue that we'll bring up is healthcare. So Democrats typically want to push for healthcare to be available to everyone and typically want to use government money to ensure that this is possible. They believe that healthcare, universal healthcare, is a human right, that every person should have healthcare. So they would support programs like Medicare and Medicaid and the ACA, which is the Affordable Care Act. Now, the Republican position would generally be, once again, let's create more jobs where people can access health care through their jobs, or save up your own money, put it in an HSA, which is a health savings account, or better yet, remove or reduce government involvement altogether and allow these private insurance companies and businesses to compete for health care, which would drastically lower the price of health care for all people, making it more affordable for everyone. So, hey, it's like, hey, let's remove the government giving people free health care and let's put the power back in the companies and let them fight for people's health care and let them compete. And if they do that, then this is going to drastically lower the cost and make it more affordable for everyone. So basically, they would believe that the government should have less involvement in healthcare and the states should decide this. Now, I don't want to skip past this too quickly because, guys, listen, this is a major, major issue that cannot be and should not be minimized. There are people who have worked their entire lives. They are not lazy. People like my mom, people like my father, people who have worked their entire lives, and they are dependent on things that the government might be able to provide, whether it is healthcare, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's Medicare, different things like that. This is affecting people's lives and their livelihood. And for that reason, this is a significant issue that we need to consider. Okay, the third issue that I'll bring up is this issue of immigration. And this is obviously one I could have put on either list, but I'll share both positions here. So Democrats and Republicans are both, at least they say they are both, for straight up securing the border. That's not the issue. The question is, how do we go about that? What is the best way to secure the border? So Democrats are typically more for wanting to change immigration laws to possibly create a path for undocumented immigrants, especially those who have been brought over as children. Let's create a path for them to possibly become citizens. They want to ensure that immigrants and those who may be fleeing their country because of potential harm are treated kindly and fairly, ensuring that at the very least, their families are intact and not separated from one another, which basically is the idea that, hey, treat someone the way you would want them to treat you. Would you want someone to separate you from your family if you are fleeing from your country because of potential harm and danger? Is that the Christian position? Now, Republicans typically want to secure the border to stop illegal immigration. So they don't necessarily have a problem with people from other countries migrating over to the United States, but they want to ensure that it's done legally. In other words, hey, we need to make sure we know exactly who is coming over to our country. It's not a problem if you're coming over, and this might include perhaps building a physical wall or increasing border patrol to ensure that nobody just straight up sneaks into our country without us knowing exactly who you are and whether you are safe or not for our country. Now, they also may be for enforcing laws to ensure that those who have already come over here illegally are held accountable. And if that means that the family is separated as a last resort so that the law is upheld, then that might be what is necessary to ensure that people do not get the idea that they're able to migrate illegally over here to the United States. Now, once again, to some Democrats, this could come off as being very insensitive, as many of these undocumented immigrants are hardworking, law-abiding citizens that actually help our country and its economy. So once again, this is something that you have to consider is affecting people's lives and their families as we look at the type of laws that we are going to enforce. Okay, number 4 is environmental stewardship. I won't spend much time on this one, but generally speaking, Democrats are more for enforcing government programs to protect the environment, including air, water, and land. Basically, they want to prevent pollution and protect natural habitats. And they feel as though the government should play a huge role in protecting the environment by passing laws that would force companies to follow environmental practices. So Republicans are typically like, hey, you know what? We are also for protecting the environment, but we don't believe that the government needs to create laws or enforce laws to force companies that possibly may have to change how they do business. Different people on an everyday basis who are working for these companies, they're going to have to change up how they do things. The companies may not be as productive, and therefore we trust that every single person is able to be a good steward of our environment without the government having to mandate and get involved and interfere and pass laws that would force companies to do things differently. And number 5, last but not least, would be the issue of education. All right. So let me kind of present the Democratic position on education. Democrats are typically for supporting public education and making higher education more affordable for everybody. They would want to have more funding for public schools. Democrats typically would want to reduce student loan debt or possibly providing free community college, once again, to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to get an education. Now, here's a big one. Many Democrats would advocate for more inclusive curriculum that reflects the diversity of all students, which could include students from non-traditional homes or those who identify as LGBTQ. So they have no problem with the curriculum in these public schools that would see, that your kids would see 2 mothers as parents and adopting children, or 2 fathers as parents, or kids who identify as an opposite gender. All of that should be in the curriculum because it reflects the diversity of all the students in that school. Now, I'll address the Republican position on education in a little bit, but listen, guys, there are obviously other issues that we could address, like criminal justice reform or advocating for stricter gun control laws to reduce gun violence. But I wanted to focus on the main ones that may cause a Christian to say, hey, these things are very, very important to me, and therefore I want to vote Democrat. So with that being said, let's now move on to the issues that would influence a Christian to vote Republican. And we might as well start off with the big one, okay? We need to spend some time here with this one, so stick with me, and that is the issue of being pro-life. Now, this is perhaps the number 1 issue for many Republican voters, but I need to make sure you understand it's not the only one, as we will see. And I say that because oftentimes Republicans are criticized or deemed or characterized as being one-issue voters. You're a one-issue voter, when in actuality, this may be the most important issue, but it's not the only issue, as we are going to see. And let me illustrate it this way, and hopefully this illustration will click for you. I want to take you back to the slavery days, and I want you to suppose that you had one party that said slavery is completely evil. We want to completely abolish this abominable act from the land, but they also wanted to raise taxes and eliminate health care, all right? But you have another party who does a lot of really good things for the community. They do a lot of good things for society. They help the poor. They lower the taxes for the people. They're strong in education, but they have been very public about wanting to promote and enforce as many laws as possible to maintain slavery and even make it more prevalent. As a matter of fact, they believe that the government should not get involved in matters of slavery and that every human being should have the choice to own slaves. It's not our place to regulate that. We will even fund programs to make it easier for anyone who wants to own slaves to do so. Now, my brothers and sisters, would you say to yourself, well, they really do stand for a lot of good things for the community, so I'll overlook their desire to enslave people? Or would that one issue of slavery outweigh all of the good things that party represents because it goes against the very will of God for his people, and it goes directly against a Christian worldview. I want to make the argument that if that illustration does not resonate with you, it's probably because you see slavery as something that would directly affect you, particularly if you are an American, or excuse me, an African American in this country. But you don't see abortion in the same way because you don't believe it directly affects you. My brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you to give that some consideration as you cast your vote. Why? Because I believe that the issue of abortion is an even greater issue than the issue of slavery. Now, as I address this, it's important for us all to keep in mind that there is a wide spectrum when it comes to being pro-life. Some people, like me, and I'll just go on record and give you my position, I'm completely on the extreme, and I believe that there are no legitimate reasons whatsoever for a woman to terminate a pregnancy other than if her life is in danger. Why do I prioritize that? Because I believe that God prioritized the institution of marriage above the institution of parenthood. And so if I have to choose between my wife and this child, I'm going to choose my wife all of the time. Now, once again, I know some of you see things differently. I'm probably gonna do a separate video where I explain and debunk all of the different excuses and justifications as it relates to abortions. But there are some people that are really, really on the extreme, and that's me. And then there are other people that say, hey, a woman should have the right to be able to abort a child for any reason at any time, regardless, right? And so you have to keep in mind that there is a wide spectrum here. But generally speaking, Republicans are typically way more pro-life than Democrats are. How do we know? Because they want to absolutely ban late-term abortions. They want to stop government programs that would fund organizations like Planned Parenthood that basically make it easier and quote-unquote safer, if you will, as if there's something as a safe abortion. They want to ban organizations like this. They encourage alternatives to abortion like adoption or supporting pregnant women through like a crisis pregnancy center. They see abortion, and rightfully so, just as I do, as the murder of an innocent unborn child. My brothers and sisters, I want to direct your attention to this photo right here. And as you can see this baby's hand at 21 weeks old. I'm not sure how you or anyone who calls themselves a humane person, and worse than that, you call yourself a Christian. You call yourself a Christian, and you can look at this photo and not see this as being absolutely an abomination to God. And you believe it's okay for a woman to be able to have the choice to murder an unborn child. Now, the Democratic Party is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum here. And once again, when I say Democrats, I'm not saying everyone who votes Democrat feels this way. I say that because I would argue that a large number of Democrats are not at all in favor of abortion, but they vote Democrat for the reasons I stated earlier. I'm merely referring to the policies that the Democratic Party that they vote for want to advocate for and promote. And this is not a subjective thing. These are facts. And the problem is that you have liberal Democrats who are in favor of abortion. Then you have more conservative Democrats who are not necessarily in favor of abortion, but still vote for the party that is in favor of it, resulting in less of a chance to see this abominable practice eliminated from our country. So Democrats would make the argument that a woman has the right to make decisions about her own body, including the choice to have an abortion. Guess what? I agree. A woman should have the right to make decisions about her own body. The problem is that that child is not a body part. How do you know? Because they weren't born with that child. Body parts are things you were born with. Your hands, your ears, your fingers, your feet, your nose, your eyes. You were born with those. You could do whatever you want with that. But just because God has allowed you to house a child for a particular time does not mean that that child is a body part. That child is not a part of your body. That child is its own body and therefore has its own set of rights that you, my brother or sister, do not have the right to step in and play God and make decisions and for a child that is not able to advocate for their own rights. So Democrats would be for Roe versus Wade. They believe in making it easier for women to access safe and legal abortions. They support government funding for organizations like Planned Parenthood that provide reproductive health services, including abortions. And when you vote Democrat, you need to know that you are directly or indirectly supporting things like this. Perfect example, not too long ago, we had the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, and right outside of the DNC, you see Planned Parenthood offering free medical abortions at the start of the DNC. What are they trying to say? Hey, we're here, and we are for it, and anybody who wants to end your child's life, you can do it right here and right now, free of charge. Now, many Democrats will criticize the Republican Party as only being concerned about life in the womb, but not outside of the womb. And this comes from the idea that many Republicans want to cut social programs that help low-income families, such as food assistance or health care, extensive paid leave, child care, thus making it harder, perhaps, for mothers to support themselves and their children after giving birth. Once again, neither party is perfect. Both parties are flawed. But the Republicans would say, no, we do care about life after birth, but in a different way. We would encourage and support charitable organizations who can give assistance, or faith-based initiatives, or community support networks, etc., or possibly tax relief to families such as child tax credits, which help parents afford the cost of raising children. Or once again, pregnancy crisis centers, adoption service, etc. They will support a lot of these things to help, but they will not support murdering an innocent unborn child. And my brothers and sisters, before we move on to the next issue, can we just all be honest for just a moment? I mean, regardless, look, I would suspect that more than likely you're a Christian watching this video, regardless of your political position. Can we all just be honest about it? This is a straight up demonic and satanic agenda that is sent straight from the pit of hell. And God is very, very angry about it. How do I know? Because if you look at the Old Testament, one of the main reasons why God was so angry with the nation of Israel is because they were adopting the practices of allowing their children to be burned and pass through the fire so they could offer their children up to pagan gods like the pagan nations around them. And this angered God so much that this reminds us that God values life. The last thing I'll say is that being pro-life doesn't necessarily qualify someone as being a good candidate, but being pro-abortion definitely disqualifies someone from being a good candidate. And for many, this issue alone is enough to make them vote Republican, but there are many more that we need to address. Okay, the next one is religious freedom. So Republicans would strongly support the idea of religious freedom, the idea that everyone should have the right to freely practice and express their religious beliefs without any interference from the government. In other words, you should be able to be free to express your faith publicly, whether in schools, workplaces, public spaces, etc. Now, let me illustrate it for you this way. Suppose you are a business owner who owns a wedding service company, like, let's say, a bakery or a photography studio or even an event venue. Now, let's look at the two different perspectives on religious freedom in the context of same-sex marriage. So Republicans would believe that your religious convictions are fundamental to how you run your business. So if your faith teaches that marriage is between a man and a woman, you may feel that providing services for a same-sex wedding, which there's no such thing, we'll call it a same-sex union, a civil union, because we cannot redefine what a wedding is. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But this would go against your deeply held beliefs. And from this viewpoint, being forced to participate in or support a same-sex civil union by offering your services could be seen as a violation of your religious freedom. So you might argue that as a business owner, you should have the right to decline services that would conflict with your religious values without fear of facing legal repercussions or accusations of being discriminatory. This perspective emphasizes the importance of protecting your ability to practice your religion even in your business decisions. Now, on the other hand, the Democratic position might say, hey, you believe that while your personal religious beliefs are important, If you're running a public business, that means you should serve all customers equally, regardless of their sexual orientation. And if a same-sex couple comes to you for wedding services, you might feel that it's your responsibility to treat them the same as you would any other couple. From this perspective, refusing to provide services could be seen as discriminatory or harmful, and ensuring that everyone has equal access to your services should take priority. And this is the view that suggests that religious freedom, now notice this once again, religious freedom doesn't extend to actions that might deny others their right or reinforce inequality, especially in a business that is open to the public. So to sum this one up, Republicans basically focus on the right to act according to your religious beliefs, while the Democratic Party emphasizes the importance of non-discrimination and equal treatment in the marketplace. In other words, hey, you can do whatever you want in your business with your religious beliefs as long as it doesn't result in discriminating against others. Democrats are typically for supporting the separation of church and state, which basically means that the government should not make laws based on religious rules, and we shouldn't create a law simply because it aligns with a particular religious group. Okay, let's deal with the third one, and this is a huge one, and I'm going to just call this one moral and family issues. I'm going to kind of lump them both together. So Republicans generally emphasize the importance of the traditional family structure, which they define as a household with a married mother and father raising their biological or adopted children. They believe this structure is the foundation of a stable society and is associated with positive outcomes for children and communities. So Republicans would often advocate for policies that support marriage, opposite sex marriage, right? Parental rights and family values, and they typically oppose efforts to redefine marriage to include same-sex couples. They also emphasize the role of traditional families in teaching values, morals, and social stability. Look, this is very, very important. It is a satanic and demonic agenda that is seeking to try to redefine what God has created to be marriage. God brought Adam and Eve together, created them both. And he says, Jesus said what? He says, a man must leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. I didn't make up the rules. You didn't make up the rules. God did at creation. And for us to have the audacity to try to redefine what marriage is and what marriage says simply because it's more consistent with the norms and standards of our culture is a demonic and satanic agenda. Speaking of that agenda, Democrats tend to have a more inclusive view of what constitutes a family. They would support various family structures, including single-parent households, same-sex couples, raising children, adopting children, and other non-traditional configurations. So they would advocate for policies that would recognize and support these diverse family units, such as marriage equality, adoption rights, once again, for LGBTQ plus couples, and protections against discrimination based on family structure. So to be clear, they would emphasize that a loving and supportive environment is the most important factor in a family's success, not a mom and a dad. As long as that child is brought up in a loving environment, that's what's most important, regardless of the specific family structure. Now, let's move on to this issue of transitioning children. So Republicans would generally oppose allowing minors to undergo medical gender transitions, such as hormone therapy or puberty blockers or, God forbid, top or bottom surgeries. They believe that children are too young to make such life-altering decisions and would argue that these procedures should be reserved for adults. You see, Republicans would often advocate for laws that would restrict or prohibit medical interventions for transgender minors, emphasizing the importance of waiting until that individual reaches the age of an adult. Why? Because they would argue that this could result in potential long-term physical and psychological effects. Now, once again, Democrats are typically on the other side of this argument. They would support the right of transgender minors to access gender-affirming medical care, including puberty blockers, once again, and hormone therapy when recommended by medical professionals. They would emphasize the importance of affirming a child's gender identity to promote mental health and well-being. In other words, hey, if you're a parent, you could be causing more harm to your child by not affirming them. They might have suicidal thoughts. They might be depressed. They might go through issues that you don't want them. So the loving thing to do is just to affirm them. If they feel like they're a boy when they were born a girl, affirm that. If they feel like they were a girl and they were born a boy, affirm that, because that's the loving thing to do. So Democrats would generally advocate for policies that would protect the rights of transgender youth to receive appropriate medical care. They would argue that this would be crucial in reducing the risk of depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues among transgender youth. And my brothers and sisters, in some states, this means that if a parent opposes a child's transition decision, that child could be taken from their custody and placed into the state system, because that would be the safest thing for that child's mental health. My brothers and sisters, come on. Come on. Wake up. As Christians, we need to wake up. Do you believe that this is what God intended? This goes directly against, once again, the order of creation. When God said in Genesis 1:27, I created them male and female. Once again, I didn't make up the rules. I wasn't present at creation. God had already established this. And for us to come alongside and say, you know what, it's okay for somebody to want to change their gender? Are you kidding me? And now we want to create laws that would make it easier for teens to mutilate their bodies. Have you ever seen the gruesomeness of these top and bottom surgeries? It's gruesome. And yet we want to pass laws that would put the power back in the hands of the children and remove it from the parents, thus damaging the home. And my brothers and sisters, once again, keep in mind that when you cast your vote, you may or may not be for this, but the party that you're voting for absolutely is. Obviously, there are other issues related to this. So Republicans would generally believe that transgender athletes should compete in sports teams that match their biological sex at birth. They argue that allowing transgender women who were assigned male at birth to compete in women's sports could create unfair advantages due to physical differences. They argue that inclusion and equal treatment are fundamental rights, and policies should reflect that by allowing transgender individuals to participate fully in sports. They also believe that individuals should be able to use the bathroom that matches their gender identity. They argue that this respects the rights and identities of transgender people and helps prevent discrimination and harassment. Okay, let's move on from there. Number 4 is school choice. Now, I need to make this one very, very clear. This is not a spiritual issue like the others, like the traditional family and transitioning children and the right to life. This is more of a social issue, but one that is important to many, so I wanted to cover it here. Republicans generally are for parents having the option to send their children to schools outside of where they may be zoned, whether it's a private school, whether it's a public school, charter school, or homeschool. And the argument is that parents know what is best for their children. And one of the reasons for this is that it will hopefully encourage a healthy competition among schools. Think about it. If a public school has many of their students opting out of that school to attend another school, maybe because the things that they're teaching there don't align with their religious worldviews, or maybe the education is just not good. Let's be honest about it, right? Then they feel like, hey, you know what? This could create some positive, healthy competition, thus raising the bar and forcing some of these public schools to increase their education and their rigor so that maybe people will choose to attend that particular school. So the idea here is, hey, Republicans would feel as though we know what's best for our children, and therefore we want to be able to have that right. Let me give you an example, illustration. Let's just say that you are a Christian parent and you're zoned for a school that is not that good educationally, or they also teaching or liberal things that don't align with your Christian worldview. As a parent, you would want to have the right to say, you know what, I know I'm zoned over here, but I want to send my child to possibly a private school. The problem is I don't have the money to do that. But what if there was government funding that would allow me as a parent to make the decision to send my child to whatever school I believe aligns more closely with our family values, our religious values, but also would provide the education that I believe is best for my child? Now, obviously, Democrats are very much against this typically. They want to focus on improving public schools rather than diverting funds away from public schools to private or charter schools. Democrats generally feel that public schools just need more accountability and oversight to see improvement, and that these schools need to be subject to more rigorous standards than private or charter schools. They would argue that taking money away from public schools could do more harm to these schools, as they depend heavily on these funds in order to have books, buy computers for kids, iPads, hire great teachers, make improvements to schools, etc. Now, the fifth and final reason in this video that I believe a Christian would vote Republican is what I'll call judicial appointments. And so typically Republicans want to appoint conservative judges that will interpret the Constitution based on its original meaning, which would focus more on traditional family values, gun rights, religious freedom, etc. Now, the Democratic Party typically would want to appoint judges that are much more liberal in how they interpret laws, notice this, passed by the Congress. Instead of simply wanting to stick to the Constitution, it's much more about interpreting the Constitution in a way that adapts to modern society in a much more progressive way. In other words, hey, you know what? Hey, yes, the Constitution says this, but what does that mean for today? How might that be adapted or applied in today's context, which obviously could result in laws that are very, very different than what the Constitution originally intended. Now, why is this important? My brothers and sisters, as we all know, these judges remain in the Supreme Court for life, which means their decisions could and oftentimes do shape the legal landscape for decades. Okay, so I'm going to share with you my perspective here in just a moment as it relates to how I plan on voting. But before I do, I think it's important for me to provide what I believe are some practical tips that I think we all need to keep in mind as this election season approaches. All right, the first one is, my brothers and sisters, please, let's not vote based on color or culture. Now, I'm going to say this. As a black man, I definitely understand the excitement around seeing a person of color rise to the top position in the country. And specifically a woman for that matter. I mean, that's an exciting thing, but that should never in any way factor into our decision of who to vote for. And if it does in any way, and only you know that, this simply means one thing. It means that we have allowed our color and our culture to supersede and override our Christianity. The second tip I want to give you is to be careful about how you post on social media. And the reason why I say this is because you will influence more people by discussing the policies that you stand for and how they are consistent with a Christian and biblical worldview than you will by simply demonizing the other party, sharing memes and different things that make the candidate look a certain way or whatever. You're not going to win anybody over like that. You're not going to influence how people think by tearing down the other side. You will do better at discussing and promoting policies of the party that you support and why they are important to you and why they should be important to Christians. So be careful how you post on social media. I probably could need to do a whole video on this one, all right? We need to be careful that our politics don't overshadow our faith. And I'm going to say this because some of you, if you're just honest about it, this issue of politics has become an idol in your life. You spend more time studying politics than you do the Bible. You spend more energy lobbying for a candidate than you do Christ. You wear paraphernalia related to your policy, or your parties rather, more than you ever would about your faith. You have more conversation with people about your politics than your faith. Oftentimes, the first thing that people see whenever they see you is not Jesus, is not Christ, it's your politics. And my brothers and sisters, if you know that politics is becoming more of a thing that is becoming evident in your interpersonal relationships than your faith, there is something wrong with that. And that means that this could very well become an idol in your life. The next tip I'm going to give you is please, 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 I beg you, do not allow how you vote to create unnecessary hatred and discord in your relationships. Your friend, your neighbor, your coworker who votes differently than you can still be your friend, your neighbor, your coworker. And you don't have to break fellowship with somebody and stop being friends simply because they see things differently than you do. The next thing I'm going to share with you is to have an open mind and spirit. Now, the reason why I say this is because some people, they've always voted Republican because that's how they were raised. Some people always vote Democrat because that's how they were raised. Their parents vote that way. Their family votes that way. And they're living in fear that if they vote differently, then then maybe I'm going to be demonized or ostracized from my family. Guys, use your brain, pray about it, be informed of all of the issues, which is why I'm making this video, and let God lead you on how you are to vote. And don't vote simply because this is the way you've always voted. Have an open mind. And the last piece of advice before I share with you how I plan on voting is to trust God with your vote. And what I mean by that is remember that even though the Bible is clear that ungodly leadership can result in the fall of a nation, it's also clear that we serve a God that is able to exercise his sovereign will and accomplish his divine will even through the hands of ungodly leadership, and we need to trust him in that. All right, so you've come to the end of this video. I know it's been a super long video, but I want to share with you my position. And before I do that, I want to share with you a scripture verse that essentially is influencing how I plan on voting. And the Bible says this. Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel." My brothers and sisters, in those days, these were the more weightier matters of the law. And I want to go on record and say, while many of the things that I talked about in this video, all of them are very, very important, and they should not be minimized at all. We talk about immigration, healthcare, injustice, and things like that. These are very, very important issues and should never be minimized. But for me, there are some issues that are weightier, that weigh more for me than the other issues. And for that reason, I want to direct your attention to this chart so that we can all analyze what I believe are the weightier matters of the law in our day. Let's take redefining family. One party says, you know what? It's okay for us to redefine what God says as a family. It can be a mom, or two moms rather. It can be two dads. It doesn't matter as long as love is present. Every other party over here that says, you know what? We want to stand on what God said is traditional family. And we want to promote laws that would encourage and promote the idea of the traditional family. Let's look at transitioning children. One party says, you know what? It's okay for children to choose their gender, to choose their sex, to go directly against what God said at creation, male and female. As a matter of fact, we want to create more laws that would put the power in the hands of the children so that children can make decisions on whatever they want. Listen, while I'm here, what kind of a world do we live in where you can get a tattoo? You can't even get a tattoo at 18, but you can change your gender at 12 or 13 years old. One party is okay with this. Another party says, you know what? No, God created male and female, and children should not have the right to make that decision. No one should make that decision until they are of an adult. Let's look at religious freedom. One party, it's restricted. You can exercise religious freedom as long as it does not discriminate against others. Another party over here says, you know what? We want unrestricted religious freedom. Let's look at the issue of abortion. One party over here says, you know what? Let's create more laws and let's fund programs that will make it more affordable, more safe, rather, and make it so that anybody who wants one can get one because they feel like that's a fundamental right for every woman. You have the other party over here that is directly against this satanic, demonic agenda and says, you know what? We want nothing of supporting any sort of programs that would make it easier and safer for women to have abortions. Let's have school choice. Once again, not a spiritual issue. One wants to put the power in the government. The other wants to give and transfer the power over to the parents. Let's look at judges. One party wants to elect judges that are more liberal, that will allow the laws to be interpreted in a way that adapts to the society. The other party over here says, you know what? No, we want to make sure that these judges will interpret the law based on the original meaning and intent of the Constitution. And finally, let's look at moral issues, LGBTQ. One party over here says, you know what? We want to create laws about bathrooms, transgender athletes. We want to create laws that would make it easier for people to get married if they want to, regardless of their gender. You have another party over here that is directly against any sort of law that would make it equal for people of LGBTQ to be able to have the same rights as those who are not. My brothers and sisters, I'm going to go on record and say, listen, these issues may not be important to you, although I believe that they should be. But for me, these issues that I just shared with you in this chart weigh so heavy on my spirit. They weigh more for me personally than issues of healthcare and criminal justice reform, although those are very important. But these issues weigh so much more heavily for me that I cannot in good conscience support a party that wants to redefine what family looks like. Family, the very core of our society. I cannot vote to pass laws that would encourage and allow children to mutilate their bodies, sometimes not even requiring parental consent. I cannot vote for a party that wants to enforce laws that would allow LGBTQ plus couples to get married to one another. I cannot support a party that's in favor of a parent possibly losing custody of their child because they don't affirm that child's decision to transition. I cannot vote for a party that is in favor of little children of opposite sexes sharing bathrooms together. I cannot vote for my daughter to one day have to compete athletically against a biological male. I just can't. I just can't. And for that reason, I'm going to go on record and say I cannot support that party. You have the right to vote however you want. And this is not me pushing my perspective on you. I'm just simply sharing with you where I'm at and the reasons why I am choosing to vote the way I'm going to vote. Here's the final question that I want to leave you with today. I think we're asking the wrong question. When you place your vote, I don't think we should be asking the question, does this party promote values that are biblical? Because as I've shared with you in this video, you could make an argument that both parties are promoting some values that are biblical. But rather, I think we need to be asking the question, which party is promoting values that are unbiblical, that directly go against the scriptures and directly against a Christian biblical worldview? I cannot tell you who to vote for or how to vote, but I can tell you for me, these issues weigh more for me. And even though they're all important and should not be minimized, these issues are the ones that I believe are the weightier matters of the law. So what are your thoughts? I know this was a super long video. I know that some of you are very triggered. I know that you're probably angry. I ask that you would respect my position. Don't come for me. Don't demonize me. All right. I respect your position and how you plan on voting. And I pray that you would not only do that for me, but others as well. Leave your comments in the comment section below. And once again, remember to be respectful at all times. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye for now.